kind of in a way segue to the political aspects and environmental justice. Mr. Ralph Bunche is the Secretary General of UNPO. Mr. Ralph Bunche is Regional Director for Europe for Fair Trials. Mr. Bunche joined Fair Trials from the OSCE mission in Kosovo, where he managed the section responsible for human rights and the rule of law, including right to a fair trial. In legal practice, he worked for O'Melveny and Myers and Housefielding on competition, financial fraud, and human rights litigation. He also served as a legal advisor to the Liberia's Minister of Finance and as a campaigns officer for the Global Match Against Child Labor. I welcome you. He's standing is very Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm not nearly as charismatic as Professor Mustafa when it comes to speaking, and I just ended up being nervous. I have some very unstructured thoughts, and one of the reasons why they're very unstructured is that I'm new to the UNPO. I was elected as the General Secretary of UNPO, which I'll explain who we are, in September, and I'm still sort of working out of my old job before I start in January. So I'm actually just getting my head into UNPO, the movement for self-determination around the world, and its members, and what that means also is I'm just getting my head into all of the things that we're talking about today that is happening in the Sindh province and to the Sindhi people. And as a result, my thoughts are somewhat unstructured, but I want to talk about UNPO, about what we do, and reflect a little bit on some of the interesting things I've been learning about since I've been here, about the structure of Pakistan, the physical structure of Pakistan, about economic and environmental justice, because I think it's actually quite critical to the future of how we might work with the World Sindhi Congress and what we might do. So just quickly about UNPO. So UNPO is an international membership-based organization. It was founded in 1991 by various different nations and peoples. So it's the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization. Founded by various nations and peoples who were seeking greater self-determination. That included people such as the Estonians, the Latvians, East Timorese, Tibet, and various others who founded the organization. And it was founded in 1991. Why? Because 1991 was the moment at which the world seemed to be changing. The Soviet Union was breaking down, the Cold War was ending, and it seemed like a moment where we might have been able to address all of the problems that came out of, and that were not resolved, that came out of the decolonization movement in the post-war era. Things that were effectively frozen because of the Cold War. And so it was formed at this moment where people were really excited. You had Fukushima talking about the end of the end of history and everything sort of becoming a very sort of stable world. And there was this thinking that the right to self-determination of peoples, this concept that actually, in some ways, the nation-state was now going to end a little bit, and you'd have a bit more self-determination of peoples. People were being able to set their own agenda, could come out of the immediate post-war era. And actually, as you all know, that didn't happen. You had various conflicts in the 90s that were given the right to self-determination a bad name, followed up by 9/11 and the sort of movement around the world to fight terrorism, that has meant that security has become the predominant discussion internationally. And by security, it is hard security. And as a result, the right to self-determination has been given a really bad name. It is, in some ways, a code word for instability, which we very much believe it isn't. But you can see it within UNPO members. We have members who are being persecuted throughout the world for trying to promote the right to self-determination of their people through non-violent means. And that's one of the big criteria for UNPO and UNPO membership, is that UNPO members must be committed to achieving their goals through non-violent means. But even with that, they are being branded as terrorists, if only just to get the compliance of the West to their persecution, people's persecution. And so what you're seeing now is a movement, unfortunately, against nations and peoples. And it's been there for a long time, but it seems to be ramping up everywhere. And you can see it in China with what's happening to the Uyghurs, who are also a member. It seems to be ramping up. And what we're trying to do at UNPO is we're trying to take the right to self-determination, and we're trying to highlight to the world that it is a real right, it's a human right, it's the first human right. It's the foundation on which all rights are based. And that it is something that is truly meaningful for the international community. And they should not just think about movements for self-determination as scary things, but actually as things that can create security for the world. And actually, while I'm listening to you all today, I think it really is very, very clear that you all in the World Sindhi Congress have a very good opportunity to help us at UNPO reshape the way in which people think about the right to self-determination and what does it mean. And the reason why I think that is because you guys, you all are so very committed to the principles of non-violence. You are very committed to a concept of your peoples that isn't bound by any one religion or things like that. And you have a very strong ability to do that. The one thing, though, that it occurs to me that we need to be talking about more is talking about the right to self-determination in the context of economic development, and in the context of, in your context, in the context of what the political structure of Pakistan is. I had a bit of a crash course, I think, today on Pakistan and Pakistani federalism, and I think, you know, as I say, I'm getting my head in the game, really, of all of our members, and one of the things that really struck me was I came in thinking, well, Pakistan is a federal country, I know what federalism means. But I've had a bit of a crash course in this session and at lunch about what federalism actually is in Pakistan. And it doesn't seem like any type of federalism that I've ever had. It seems a lot more like a centralized government system. And why is that interesting from the context of UNPO and the right to self-determination? It's because, for me, the context of the right to self-determination was that it is a valuable right on which everything is based, including economic development. Because we understand that peoples, the closer the government gets to their people, the more effective the government is in promoting the rights of its people and in promoting economic development. And what's interesting about that is that there's a whole movement around the United Nations. They have these sustainable development goals that is the big focus of the United Nations development community right now. And it's about sustainable development. How do we develop the world in a sustainable manner? And within that dialogue, they're not talking about self-determination, but they talk a lot about local self-government. And that local self-government is the way in which, one of the most valuable ways in which we will achieve the sustainable development goals, that we will, as a people, develop ourselves sustainably. We understand that climate change and all of those things requires a global solution, but it also requires a very local solution. And what's very disturbing about the economic and justice session that we're talking about today, and what I've heard about them in federal Pakistan, is how little that seems to be playing out in reality in Pakistan. And I was struck by the discussion from the lady from, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, from the European Foundation for Southeast Asia. What's South Asia? Excuse me. I was struck by the discussion of the Belt and Road, and it's Beijing and Islamabad talking about the Belt and Road And then you've got Washington DC and the IMF saying we don't really like it. And I was thinking, well, so we're talking about the development of a very local place, but we're actually talking about it in a context that's Washington DC, Beijing, and Islamabad. And in what way is that a reflection of what we'd all hoped the decolonization of the world would look like in a post-war society? It struck me that it looked nothing like it, that it looked only like you're replacing one rule from distance with another rule from distance. And you're not going to get the economic development that you want. You're not going to get the ability to grow the people, to fight climate change, and to do all of these big goals that these organizations, these big international organizations and states profess that they believe in. You're not going to get it unless you have more of a discussion locally. And in that presentation, I heard nothing once, and I don't know if that's just because you were giving the whole thing, but I heard nothing about consultations with the people in Sindh province. I heard nothing about the government of Sindh province having a discussion in that, and you're shaking your head because it sounds like it's not happening. And that, I think, is what I would like us to be doing at UNPO with the World Sindhi Congress, is to try and highlight to the world the value of more local government in Sindh province, and frankly, throughout the world. And to try and combat this sense of, well, we've had decolonization of the world and it's stopped here, and now we have these nation states with these boundaries that are the way that we're going to develop the world. Because it's not the way that we're going to develop the world. It's just going to be the way that we end up creating instability in the world through poverty, through ineffective tackling of climate change, and through, frankly, the suppression of people's wants and desires, which ultimately doesn't lead to security. And so that was what I took away from that. I'm sorry that it was a bit unstructured, but this is my reflections on this, and I'd like to work with you all to try and message that a bit better, build on that, and message that better internationally, because I think it's a very powerful message. So thank you.